All right, everybody, thank you for joining us today. We have one of our favorite presenters today, Scott Kudelka from the DNR, best known for, he's the bison man from Minneopa State Park. So before we begin the presentation about opossums, he's just going to do a quick update for us on what's happening with the bison out there. Just as a reminder, if you can keep your microphone muted, that'd be great. And also this will be shared on the virtual Vine page within hours, basically, of the completion of the program. So I will step aside now and let Scott tell us about what's happening with the bison.
All right, well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so the bison, it's really interesting. I was just out there on Monday, and our breeding bull is in heat, and so he was grunting away and trying to push off some of the younger bulls to make sure that they weren't trying to get in there and breed too. But we're thinking that one of the older of the younger bulls maybe got a chance to do some breeding. So we'll actually find that out this fall once we take DNA samples and we can trace back the parentage of each of our new calves that would be happening, I guess, this spring or next spring. We have 43 bison, and that will be probably the most we'll have. We're going to be doing what we call Fall Management Day, and we're going to be moving out at least 16, but we're going to actually get another 3 or 4 cows from the zoo and Blue Mounds. 43 is a little too much for what we have for vegetation there, and what we're getting rid of is our males, basically because we already have their DNA. We don't want them, we don't need them breeding. We need, really, the breeding needs to be from our bull that came from Teddy Roosevelt National Park. And he really stands out now. When he arrived, he was a yearling, and now, of course, he's almost 5 years old, and he has gained some heft, and he's got a big head. So he really stands out, and like I said, they should be breeding here into September. So if you get a chance, just go out and you can hear him, especially in the morning. He really is grunting away. It's quite amazing at I guess how they can change, where he is just very mellow until these 2 months of the year, and then when he starts breeding, he shows that he wants to be in charge. Any questions about what we're with the bison or anything like that? We had 13 calves this spring, and they have pretty much their what we call light brown coats have disappeared, and they have the same coat looking like all the other bison. Their horns are just starting to develop, and so you can see them kind of popping out of the top of their heads.
Is there any genetic breakdown if it's father and child creating another bison?
Yeah, that's the other thing that we want to avoid, and so we don't think that would be happening this year, but next year that could be a possibility. So those cows that would have been born his first year, sired by him, will also be leaving, so that will prevent that. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions about the bison, or otherwise I can jump into my presentation.
Does the range pretty much stay open until you have to close it for weather in the fall and
yeah, so we've had to close it a couple times this summer because of rain. We've had some flooding on our road. That's not uncommon. We should be good to go. Usually when we need to close it is early spring, March and April, just because as the frost is coming out of the road, that road was not made for the heavy traffic that it gets. You know, before the bison, we always closed it once snow hit, and we wouldn't open it up until snow had melted. What we really need is a paved road, but we've been told that'll be about $1 million. We don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, that's just pocket change, right?
What's that?
That's just pocket change, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not amount the other stuff that we have that needs to be replaced, like our bathroom in our campground, which was built in 1971, and it's basically a vault toilet with showers. You can imagine what the smell is like in the middle of summer. It's not pleasant.
I do have a question.
Sure.
When the animal is born, how long does it stay with the parents before it gets shipped out?
So they will be born in the spring, and then we will do what we call a fall management day in October. So they'll be 6 months before. So that's pretty typical of what you would see if you were born, or if you were, lived on a cattle farm. That's about the time that you're removing the calves from the cows.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tom. Any other questions? If not, I am going to share my screen. So I'm going to bring up my presentation here, and we'll see how this works. All right.
Working well so far.
Yeah, now I just need to move my thing over to hit slideshow, and then I can start from the beginning. All right. So we're going to talk about, and I'm going to right away just probably use what most people refer as possum. That's not the correct term. It'd be opossum, but so used to doing that. But what I want to really strike here is that, the possum really gets a bad reputation. I read one writer says, "Pity the poor possum. The awful mangled marsupial definitely suffers from an image problem." And it's perceived more as a giant, dirty, scavenging rat than rather a cute creature. But you'll notice with some of these pictures, I think that they do look really, they have their own cuteness to them. And I think the striking thing is that it is North America's only marsupial. So it has a unique set of characteristics that we're going to talk about. Early French explorers called it rat de bois, so rat of the woods, just like the big woods kind of thing. And it's because, of course, that long tail makes it look like a rat, but it's not part of the rat family. And it's really one of our more common animals that we find in North America, whether living or squashed along the road. But we're going to I think you're going to be surprised at some of the things that I have found out, and I thought I knew quite a bit about our opossum. Just some facts here. The females are called Jills, and the males are called Jacks. And they're about the average full-grown size, about the size of a house cat. They're pretty easy to spot. President Benjamin Harrison actually had 2 pet possums, which I think is really interesting. That not what you would think as a typical pet, especially in the White House. And what I was always surprised that it wasn't Teddy Roosevelt, because he, of course, was known for having some unique pets living in the White House, especially with all his kids there. When they're overweight, their eyes will go cross-eyed. I'm not sure why, just something that people have observed. There was a possum in 2006 that they named Robin, who actually survived a double arrow attack. And as you'll find out here, possums can be hunted and then also trapped here in Minnesota. There are actually 65 different species of opossums found here, what would be in the Americas. Only one that what we classify that be living here in North America, one that you find sometimes in your backyard. And then in the summer, they'll actually lick themselves and cover their fur and spit to keep cool. And people think that they are the ones tipping over your garbage can. Most likely they're not. That will probably be the raccoon. Again, people do call them ugly, but they are incredibly useful and typically misunderstood. And so we are going to talk about more about some of the things. First, I just want to do some background about them. Their scientific name or their full name is the Virginia opossum, mainly because that was where it was first described in Virginia. It doesn't mean that that's only where you would have found possums or opossums when Europeans arrived on the shoreline, but that's when Captain John Smith, the English explorer, is one that's credited for naming the opossum when he came here in the New World in 1608. And he actually got the name from, and I can never pronounce it, but it's an American Indian tribe that would have been living in the area, and how they pronounced it or kind of was written was Opossum, and then I think changed probably to reflect in how it was pronounced. And that term actually means white beast or white animal, and that pretty much is the dominant color. I'm going to read what he actually wrote about his encounter. He says, an opossum had a head like a swine and a tail like a rat, and is the bigness of a cat. Under her belly she had the baggie wherein she lodged and carried and suckled her young. Again, typically people drop that letter O when they pronounce it opossum, but would be scientifically incorrect. It should be opossum. And I'm going to explain why that means, why we have two different types of species with almost similar names. So if you know anything about the James River, that would have been one of the first English colonies here in North America, and that's where Captain John Smith, he actually had been out hunting when he found this odd animal. And again, he thought it was a patchwork of a cat, a rat, and a pig. He was very fascinated by the animal because he had traveled across Europe and Africa and had never encountered any creature like this. And so again, sounding out the words, he had wrote Opossum, but again, I think for pronunciation, it was changed later. There's actually an earlier description of the opossum. It's not the one that we find here in North America, but actually one found in Brazil. And it was the captain of the Christopher Columbus ship, the Nina, and he declared it a monster. And he said its front was like a fox, the hinder a monkey, and the feet like a man's, and the ears like an owl. So again, just some of the more interesting descriptions. And the reason I bring it up is because he actually brought a live female and her young back to King Ferdinand of Spain. And it created, if you imagine, a sensation over there in Europe. And it became really a symbol of the wonders and the weirdness wandering the mysterious New World. And of course, for Europeans, this was a mysterious place. We didn't know much about it for actually a long time. Again, it really has an unfortunate reputation. I think with its odd looks, sometimes it's clueless demeanor, and then of course it does like to eat trash. And if anybody has kept dog food or cat food outside, that most likely a possum has come in and ate. Widely considered probably a half a rung above the rat on the wildlife ladder. So again, it does not have a good reputation. And this actually even plays out historically. The Santee Sioux word for opossum means big rat. And again, you can see why. It's got that long tail and it kind of has some of that similar characteristics. John Lawson, who was traveling through the Carolinas, this is what he wrote. They're a very stupid creature, utterly neglecting their safety. They're most like rats of anything. But I think about if you've had encounters with a possum, they're very exceptionally non-aggressive and non-destructive. Some people will accuse them of digging up their backyard, but that's probably another animal like a skunk. Skunks do that because they're looking for bugs and stuff underneath the grass, especially during dry times. They do not harm people or pets. And again, they do not have the really capability to turn over the trash cans or digging into holes and things like that. If that's being done, again, it's probably a stray dog, raccoon, or even a skunk. Skunks can be pretty destructive when they're looking for grubs and stuff like that. And then how far back? It's misconception, but some people call them a living fossil, meaning that they would have been here for hundreds of millions of years, but that's really not true. The oldest possum fossils are roughly 20 million years old, so still have been around a long time. And the common ancestor of all living opossums, they date back roughly 23 million years old. So if you hear that term being a living fossil, yeah, they've been around for millions of years, but not quite as far as what people maybe would originally thought. And I think another fascinating thing about the possum is how far they have actually moved in their range. When we think about mammals especially, we have seen the destruction of almost of some species. You know, think about bison. We were down to 300 at one time in 1890. But really the possum, especially the one here in North America, has benefited by humans in many ways, and of course not benefited, especially if they're run over or hunted or trapped. Their ancestors evolved in South America. They arrived here in the continent or invaded the continent about 800,000 years ago, and that was when the formation of the Isthmus of Panama. So as a species, you know, they have still been here a long time ago. When John Smith first came across the opossum 400 years ago, it did not live here in Minnesota. In fact, it arrived here in the southeastern part of the state around 1900. Again, they have not been here that long in Minnesota, especially when you look at historical timeline. Today's range, again, they have been moving farther north and then also farther to the west. There could be many reasons for that. One is definitely because of humans with our transportation systems. Think about culverts, roads, things like that. It makes it much easier for animals to move, and possums are not by far the only one that has taken advantage of this. And they've been, again, proven to be one of nature's most adaptive creatures. They've been moving more into these colder climates. They've already made it all the way up to Quebec. And they were actually common in southern Michigan by the 1920s, southeastern Ontario. They've now actually been found in North Dakota. And what's interesting is they're an animal built for the tropics, but they keep pushing north with, again, from the help of humans. And the first one spotted actually in Grand Forks, a suburb of Grand Forks, in January of 2017. Somebody had seen it eating sunflower seeds at the base of a bird feeder. It was actually ended up being killed by somebody with a bow and arrow, and then collected by this woman who was actually from the University of Minnesota doing research on the movement of opossums as they continue to move again farther north. Here in Minnesota, They again arrived about 100 years ago, but it's been relatively recent of their spread into metro areas and the central Minnesota. And again, like I said, this isn't unusual. We have seen this with other animals like gray foxes and bobcats, where they're showing up in areas that we wouldn't have seen them before. And it really is, if you think about the roads, the bridges, the ditches, the culverts that we've added to the landscape for the last 200 years, it makes it easier for these wandering animals, not only to travel, but to scavenge for food. And especially if you compare it to what it was like before with forest and prairie, and you think about them moving. And then of course, some of them hitch rides. There was an armadillo that got caught up into a hay bale. So when they were rolling a hay bale down in Texas, it got caught up in the middle. It was put on a truck unknowingly. It got up to Henderson and actually was still alive and crawled out of the truck, was actually crossing the road and got hit and killed. So again, they can travel and pick up rides. And so, as I said, they can be hunted from late October to mid-March without limits. So they're kind of like the badger. Climate change has made a difference too. Again, they're an animal that would have evolved in the tropics, and where they're mostly susceptible to cold temperatures is the base of their ears, the base of their nose, and the base of their tail. A lot of times you'll see them have fallen off because, or parts of them have fallen off because of getting frostbite. But when we look at our annual temperature here in Minnesota, since the early 80s, it has increased by 1.5 degrees. Now, that may not seem a lot, but what we're seeing is that during the winter, the temperatures have increased more substantially, and our night temperatures have increased. So if you think about the two most vulnerable times for opossums would have been at night, and during the winter, that temperature change has been higher than the 1.5 average since the early 1980s. If they will actually den down if the temperature is below 21, but as soon as it rises to 28, they'll keep active even through the night. And just to step back, there is another creature called the possum. So this is where the confusion comes in. For here in North America, the O was actually dropped as early as 1630. But there is another group of animals that we find in Australia and New Guinea. And what happened was the mistake is they thought those animals and the opossum that we found here in North America would be similar animals, and that is not the case. And so that's where they were named possum. And so that's where the confusion comes in. And so the true possum, as you can see, here is quite different than what we find, especially with our North America opossum. And so they are closely related to the other Australian marsupials, such as kangaroos. And there's actually 70 different species of marsupials called possums found in Australia and Indonesia. And so we have one is the brush-tail possum. And that is widespread in mainland Australia, and it's similar in size to what we find here with our North America opossum. It has that pre-stenciled tail, and it spends a lot of time in eucalyptus trees feeding on leaves. And the difference that you can really tell is that tail that you can tell by their tail. The possum for us is hairless, and then the possum or opossum for us is hairless, and the possum is covered with fur. Just want to talk a little bit about another one. This one is a sugar glider, and the reason I bring this one up is because people actually have it for pets, and so you might have even seen this in a pet store. They are native to Australia, Indonesia, Tanzania, and New Guinea. And what they have is a membrane that's straight between the wrist and the ankles, and it kind of acts like a parachute, so it allows them to glide long distances. And again, they're very popular as pets. As you can see, they're very cute, but people have to remember is they're nocturnal. So if you don't mind them being noisy at night, because that's when they would be the most active. And not only that are they gliding around, they're very vocal. So while they can be very sweet and charming, they can also be very loud and noisy at nighttime. And they have no relation to the Virginia possum, so share no DNA. Other opossums would be found and they're endemic to the Americas, so they would be found to our Central and South America. There's actually 103 different species, including our Virginia possum, and found in North, Central, and South America. But again, our Virginia possum is the only one found here in North America. There is one that's close in Central. It's called the common opossum, also sometimes called the southern or black-eared opossum. It lives in northeast Mexico and Bolivia. It prefers the woods. It can also live in fields and cities. It is sometimes hunted for food. They are actually considered pests because they have a somewhat like raccoon behavior. They raid trash cans, nest in locations that are not suitable, and cause mayhem if encountered and living in human spaces. So they eat a lot of same things that our opossum does, our Virginia opossum. I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a few slides down the road. But I think would be interesting is the fact that our Virginia opossum is moving farther north. I could almost see that this might be happening with also our common opossum. So maybe a chance down the road that that will actually make its way here to North America. So let's just step back and actually talk about a marsupial, since it is our only marsupial found. So they actually deliver tiny babies whose heart, brain, and other organs are still growing. And they have that pouch, and there's a reason that there's the pouch beyond just protection when it comes for developing the babies. And again, if you think about kangaroos and koalas, they would also be marsupials. It's actually a very small class of animals. There are only about 200 modern species that are recognized. And again, thinking about kangaroos, the wombats, and of course our possum. Again, here's just a few of some of those that would be found. Mostly that you'll find them again in Australia and those places. The marsupial, actually, their fossil record dates back 130 million years. And they're one of the more primitive that we find of the mammals. So for mating, they actually mate from midwinter to midsummer and often have multiple litters in a year. But the thing is, when you're talking about litters, is the farther south, the more litters they have, and the farther north, the least amount of litters. So here in Minnesota, we're probably only seeing maybe one litter. And again, they're mating between January and May, and they can have up from 6 to almost 25 babies. And of course, one of the reasons is because many of those babies will not survive. And the males have a forked penis. There was a saying at one time that they were bred through the female's nose. And of course, we know that's not true, but just because of the penis and the way the look of the nose. Then they breed just much like other mammals. When they're in heat or looking to breed, the males make a clicking noise out of the side of their mouth, and then they'll wander because they're more of a solitary animal. And then the female will sometimes repeat that in return. And then as soon as the mating is done, the male or the jack leaves and does not return. So again, like many other mammals, it's up to the female. Now, after just a short digestion of 12 to 13 days, so that would be the shortest pregnancy of any mammal here in North America, they will give birth, and I said up to 25 live young at a time. And again, it is for the survival. Many of them will not survive. And again, the cooler climates like here in Minnesota, they're probably only having one litter compared to farther south. And they are small. They're helpless. They're blind. They're hairless. They're almost transparent. A newborn opossum is only about a ½ an inch long, weighs far less than a penny. In fact, it would take 16 of them to weigh as much as a penny. So you're talking incredibly small, about the size of a honeybee or a jelly bean or a raisin or a navy bean. So this one, of course, is not the size of what they would have came out of the female, but the entire litter would fit in a teaspoon. So that's how small. And what they do is they're called joeys, and they immediately crawl into the mother's pouch where they will continue, and the pouch is there for them to develop. And again, over half of the newborns will not make it. So getting to the pouch, because again, they're born blindless and hairless, but they have this strong instinct to survive. And so it's like feeling the pull of gravity to make it into their pouch. It's kind of like an involuntary swimming motion. So it's only about 4 inches to go from the belly to her pouch. Their eyes and ears are not open. The mother licks her belly, making a path for the possums for the babies to follow, but otherwise does not help them reach their pouch. And again, it's kind of weeding out the weaker ones. And then once they're inside the pouch, they're gonna find a nipple or a teat. And what's interesting is the mother only has 13, and they're actually arranged in a horseshoe configuration, 12 around a central number. So if you have 25 and all 25 happen to make it to the pouch, only 13 are going to win, because once they latch onto one, they will not let go for many weeks. So they're not like other mammals where they're going to be sharing or even letting go of that. But you can see why. I mean, they're not fully developed, and so they need that. So once they latch on, the tit will fill with milk, and then they're basically locked in place 8 to 10 weeks, and then will continue to develop. And this vital connection will remain unbroken. And so it's kind of like a built-in incubator in its belly, and they're relatively safe inside that pouch. In fact, when mother opossums have been killed, they will find the babies relatively unharmed, even after they're killed, say, by a car. The mother and the babies, so after about 2 months, their eyes open and they begin to spend time outside the pouch. After about 70 days, they begin to explore. They're climbing in and out of the pouch. After another month, the mouse-sized joeys crawl onto their mother's back and ride along as she searches for food. So if you can imagine, let's say all 13 survived, that's a lot to carry around. But what they're doing is they're practicing survival skills, such as how to climb trees, which is really important for safety-wise, and then, of course, to stay away from predators. So they will ride along tightly with their strong claws, and then their tail also helps them stay on there. And then later on, when they're big enough, they'll run alongside their mother. So again, if you thought that all possums were ugly, I say, nope, here's a really cute one. And so as they're young, they're actually learning the importance of cleanness. They will wet their front paws with saliva, and they'll bathe themselves from top to bottom every day. So think about your cat. Their long claws make great combs to remove tangles, bites of food, and insect pests that might get in there. When they're about 4 months old, so think about that, 4 months old, they will leave their mother and face the world alone. So again, compared to other mammals who sometimes will spend a year or two with their mothers, they only stay with them about 100 days. And then they're sexually mature about 6 to 8 months, because typically possums only live to about 2 years old. So think about at 7 to 8 months, they can actually start having babies. So it's really a fast process. Communication, they do have different ways to communicate. The young possums will make sneezing sounds or a soft cuckoo to call out their mother, who then will respond with a clicking noise, kind of like the same way when they were mating. Then when they're threatened, if you've ever been around them, when they're threatened, they'll make a hiss or a growl, which is not uncommon among mammals. And then, like other mammals, they will communicate through scent glands. So the male will emit a special order to begin mating with females. The glands in the female pouch help baby joeys find their way inside after birth. So again, we always think that skunks are the only ones that have glands. Even cats, when they're upset, have glands that makes it sound like they just farted, but it's because they're actually upset. Habitat, they historically would have lived primarily in riverside forest, which would make sense because if you're in a tree, you're much better protected. Especially along rivers and streams, which would have gave them a drinking source and also for food. But they have adapted quite well to our cities, one because of food and then also warmer temperatures. You think about that urban heat, they're always warmer than the surrounding areas. And so that allows them, especially in the winter, to adapt. And then of course, much easier to find water and food and even in some cases, shelter. They are not picky. They will stay aloft in trees as much as possible. They're not territorial, meaning that they're not going to chase out other opossums, and they do not maintain separate home ranges. So they'll move wherever they need food and shelter, and they do not hibernate. Which makes sense. If they're an animal of the tropics, you didn't need that. And so that's the same case. What they do is they slow down in the winter. So that provides them a way to survive here. So they have been really adapting for hundreds of years in order to move up to these northern climates. Again, their risk of getting frostbite because it's the hairless ears and the hairless tail and that hairless nose, which would make sense. In the winter, some family groups will make burrows or even under houses to help survive. They can travel 15 miles in just 2 weeks. Some estimates they will travel between 10 acres to 100 acres. So actually quite a bit. But again, the main purpose is to find food. They take a really relaxed approach to making a home. A banded squirrel nest, cozy space within a rock pile or a wood pile. They can settle into a hollow tree, as you see here, squeeze through a window or snooze in an old shed or your attic. You may not want to think that they might be up there, but they might. Their dens can include stumps, haystacks, vine tangles, road culverts, rock piles, and even crannies. They do not dig or build shelters, so they're not going to damage when they're inside. Really, their biggest investment when it comes to their home and shelter is just to make a simple grass bed. And what they'll do is they'll carry that with their tail and then also in their mouth. So they can use that tail to grab onto things as we talked about. And again, that just softens their nest. And their fat reserves is what's going to keep them warm as it gets cold. So our opossum has 50 teeth, even more than we do. So it's the most found of any North American mammal. So if you can imagine, they can crunch through shells, munch small animal bones, and they will growl and hiss and show their 50 sharp teeth. But in reality, they're gentle. They're not going to come chasing out at you and bite you or anything like that. Their teeth is designed for ripping and grinding. Again, that helps them eat a lot of other things that other mammals probably wouldn't be able to eat. And then let's go into our foraging and hunting. As you can see, they can really pretty much climb on anything that they want. They're quite timid. They're going to be out at night. That's probably the reason that a lot of people don't see them. And they're really, their best hunting weapon is their keen sense of hearing. They don't have really good eyesight. Their ears will twitch when they listen for any noise, I suppose kind of like a deer does. And then they'll prowl a mile or more at night foraging. And they will, if hungry, well, they will emerge out of places even at freezing temperatures. Again, food would be overtaking the risk of frostbite in order to be able to survive. They will, after a meal, they will actually sit on their hind legs and tail and wash itself like a cat. And again, they have exceptional hearing, smell, and then taste. It likes the taste of almost everything. So again, they will pretty much eat anything. In fact, a neighbor of mine had a possum that died in its garage. They put it outside. He went out to move it and he found another opossum eating it. So they're not picky eaters. So they're called omnivores, meaning they'll eat vegetation and meat. Mostly carrion is what they're going to eat. They actually eat more animal than they do plant food. They'll eat insects, grasshoppers, snails, rodents, frogs, berries, overripe fruit, grasses, leaves, carrion, and especially will eat snakes. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Eggs, corn, and other vegetables. So again, they are an optimistic hunter. They're going to find whatever they can eat. Again, you know, their diet includes a lot. We always think the coyote has a varied diet, but it's pretty much the same way. They'll actually dip into a stream and catch catfish. They will actively hunt small birds and animals. They will dig up insects. So again, if you have insects, say in your garden or a pest that you don't want in your house, having them around, not in the house, but around the house will help. They will actually hunt and eat rats. So again, they're providing really beneficial. And of course, if you have dog food or cat food outside, not only are raccoons attracted to it, but so is our opossum. And they will eat the skeletal remains of rodents and roadside kills. So actually they're cleaning up, you could say, our natural environment. And then one of the few animals that regularly hunt or prey on shrews and moles. They're a healthful eater. Some people accuse them of coming in and eating their fresh vegetables and fruit. But really, they're going to do rarely enough to do much harm. In most cases, they're actually being helpful. They eat insect larvae and slugs, including some that can damage farm and garden plants. And they dine on rotting fruit, vegetables, and dead animals. So again, they're actually cleaning up our ecosystem, buying that. And by doing that, they're getting rid of habitats for disease, because of course anything that is actually decomposing can be a cause for disease. The other thing that they're remarkable for is they eat ticks. And not only that they eat ticks, but they will remove and eat 90% of the ticks that try to bite them. And so if you think about, we have, and you see on this picture, it's actually eating ticks off a deer's head. So they reduce the risk of tick-borne disease such as Lyme's disease. And they just have this unusual tick hunting ability. They have done research and suggest that they can eliminate up to 5,000 ticks in a season. So if you think of just one possum, and so it appears that that's probably one of their top menu items, and they will kill and eat far more ticks than any other animal. Again, so very beneficial to us and other animals. And of course, like any other prey, they face many dangers. Traveling at night, of course, getting hit by a car. Great horned owls are probably their #1 predator, but coyotes, bobcats, and foxes also eat them. So that's why one of the things that they breed rapidly, because what they're doing is replacing the ones that are killed. And if you can imagine, it doesn't take much to kill a possum. And again, the biggest killers of really for enemies for our possum is us, and then our best friends, dogs. Not surprising, and probably not here, but people do hunt and consume opossum. There was actually, and I don't know if that's the case, but there have been opossum farms operating in the United States in the past. They were eaten together with sweet potatoes. So think about the southern areas. Our own President Jimmy Carter hunted opossums along with other small game. And then their fur was made for coats. And many people enjoy baking and then eating the opossum. Down in parts of Mexico, their tails were considered a folk remedy for infertility. And again, humans account for the majority of opossum deaths, basically roadkill, and then also for hunting them. So their lifespan, as I said, typically the short end be 2, at the long end it'd be 4 years. Again, so they do not live that long, and that's not uncommon. The smaller you are, the shorter your lifespan is going to be. But they are a hardy animal and can sustain a variety of injuries and still survive. Evidence of previous broken bones is not uncommon when you find the skeletal material of a possum. And again, just thinking about how they can survive our winters here despite not being built for that. They're incredibly agile. If you've ever watched them, they're world-class tree climbers. They have sharp claws. They have opposable thumbs. Need to take a drink of water, and that might help me. Excuse me. So opposable thumbs, and it's actually on their hind feet. And that prehensile tail, again, helps them scale and climb the branches. And so with those sharp claws, they can actually dig into the bark when they're climbing. And so if you've ever seen their tracks, it kind of looks like human tracks, especially the rear feet. So they are, besides us and chimps and things, they're the only other mammal that has that opposable thumb. People mistakenly believe the raccoon does, but they don't. Their other fingers look really similar to our fingers. And if you can imagine how that can help them grasp on. And then all four feet have claws, and then they have these pads with tiny ridges. And they're like cleats, like a soccer player. So if you think about the cleats keeping them from skidding on a wet grassy field, that's the same thing that helps those opossums climb a tree. It keeps them gripping, and even if the tree is wet or things like that. Common thing about their tail, people think that they hang from their tail when they're asleep. They can't. The babies are really the only ones that can hang from their tail. They're small enough. If you think about it, as they get bigger, they're just too heavy to hang like that. But they're strong enough to be able to think about grasping that grass, or even helping them climb trees. They can grasp onto branches and stuff. Their tail actually makes about 1/3 of its body length. So it is a large tail that they have. And the other thing is they're rarely sick. They have one of the strongest immune systems in the animal world. They rarely become ill with rabies or other wildlife diseases that can be passed on to people or pets. they think it has to do with its body temperature, which is several degrees lower than that of other mammals. And so most viruses need warmer conditions to survive. And so again, they're presenting a far less health risk to other animals like dogs and cats. And then again, they're more immune to many of the disease. They're also resistant to botulism, which is common in many mammals. So again, even though they have a really bad reputation, there's a lot of really unique things. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about rabies because that again is a common misconception that possums have rabies. They do, but it's a really minority number. The Center for Disease Control here in the United States report that the vast majority of recorded rabies cases come from the bite of 4 animals: raccoons, skunks, foxes, and bats. And if you don't know anything about rabies, it's a terrible virus that attacks brain functions. Usually when you see a raccoon or another animal infected by rabies, they act in very unusual ways. There will be drooling, disoriented, very aggressive. Usually you see them out during the day. Again, that can be transmitted to other animals. And so it's not something to just push aside, but just making the point that opossums and rabies is very uncommon. And one of the reasons that people think that opossums do have rabies is because of how they go into a defense display. And what they do is they gap with their mouths wide open, they'll hiss, they'll wither and tend to intimidate. And that becomes a misconception for rabies. But that is just their classic defense. And of course, the other one I'll talk in a little bit is by playing dead. And so again, you can see why people think that opossums have it. Because at times when they're playing dead, they'll actually pick up their head to check to see if the coast is clear. And then if not, they'll actually fling themselves back in the ground again. So again, if you're thinking, yeah, they're displaying rabies. So if you think about, again, going back to the reason why scientists don't think that they carry rabies like other animals is because of their body temperature. The average normal body temperature for a raccoon is 102.8 degrees, while the average one for a possum is 95 degrees or sometimes less. So quite a bit of difference there. They do report there's a handful of cases, but again, only 1 in 800 opossums is ever affected by the disease. So again, a really small number. They do, not for ours, but for the common possum, they do have a bacterial disease. Again, just to point out that they do suffer from some diseases, but nothing like other animals. And this is actually one for the common possum. What is really interesting about our possum is that one is, even though they're what you consider a shy animal, they're a very daring hunter, and they will eat poisonous snakes like timber rattlesnakes. And it's because they have this immunity that has built up over time from snake bites. And one of their defenses is the substance in their blood. The molecules of this substance can attach to and destroy snake venom as it moves through the opossum's body. And so now researchers are actually looking at ways to make that similar substance to treat people who get bitten by poisonous snakes. And so they have a remarkable resistance not only to rattlesnakes, but cottonmouth, Russell's viper, and Asiatic cobra. And so really the only thing that ever shows any reaction is just the fang punctures of where the rattlesnake or the other bees or other snakes have bitten it. And they're also immune to bee stings and other toxins. Again, they may not live long, but they have a lot going for them. What's kind of interesting about this defense mechanism is that, of course, it evolved in order to survive. And so the possums that would have been bit by poisonous snakes, or snakes with venom, they're the ones that survived and the other ones didn't. So that DNA carried over. But what's interesting now is there is a snake. It's called the fer-de-lance. It's one of the most venomous snakes in the New World. And it actually has gone the other way. So it has developed a highly potential venom that will kill possums. So possums were able to bring in mechanisms that prevent it. And then snakes, of course, because they need animals. This one is developing stronger venom in order to kill the possum. And of course, when threatened, most animals, they run, right? That's a pretty typical behavior. Our possum will growl, it'll belch, urinate, and it'll even defecate. This is really their first line, is to hiss, growl, and then show their sharp teeth. And they'll actually raise their pitch as the threat becomes more urgent. When separated or distressed, baby opossums will make a sneezing noise to signal their mother. And then again, their mother will return with that clicking sound. If threatened, the baby will open its mouth and quietly hiss until the threat is gone. So again, they haven't had enough experience in that way. But again, whenever possible, the first choice for the possum is to run away from dogs, people, and other threats. But the problem is it cannot run fast. So if that's your first line of defense, so play possum, right? That's the common term. If the warnings don't scare away, it's possible predator. The possum collapses. We call it playing a possum, and it's no joke. It's not doing that by choice, or it's not even pretending to be dead. It's actually collapsing because it's extremely scared and it suffers a temporary nervous shock. So basically like fainting, losing that blood from your heart to head. And even when the predator bites the possum, it won't move. And at the same time that it has gone into this state, it will secrete yucky body fluids. And so this causes the predator usually to lose interest and go away. And so after a few minutes or a few hours, when the danger is past, the possum just gets up and continues on its way. So it's an involuntary reaction. Again, a lot like fainting, they just seize up. Sometimes in that state, they will also bare their teeth. They'll foam at the mouth. Again, if you're thinking about rabies, they will again produce that foul smelling fluids from their anal glands. It's to mimic sickness, because if you're another animal, you're not going to eat something that you think is sick, because that could get you sick. But it is effective deterrent against predators, especially the ones that typically avoid carrion. And so its back and toes will curl, the tongue will roll out, the body goes limp, and the breathing seems to cease. And then it will empty its bowels. You can poke it, prod it, and there will be no response. So mighty good acting on our side of our possum. It goes into the just a catatonic state, and it's oblivious to pain and rough treatment right down to its reflexes. You can touch its eyeballs and it won't blink. The predator can bat it around, claw, chew it, even break its bones without eliciting even as much as a wiggle. Because of course, if the possum showed any signs of life, then that predator would know that it could eat it. So again, it's a lifeless cuisine, is the turnoff, and it's what biologists theorize that evolved to keep predators from eating the possum. And so studies of possum populations show a high percentage of multiple healed overbites and bone fractures, most likely from other animals trying to eat it when it goes into this. The animal will typically regain consciousness after a few minutes to 4 hours. The process begins with a slight twitching of the ears. I would imagine maybe testing the waters. During that state, which can last up to 6 hours, the possum's breathing and heart rate all decrease. So probably not showing any signs of life is very important. So how smart is our opossum? It is a slow-moving creature, so it does not have a good reputation for being very smart. When faced with car flashing headlights or honking horns, they usually do not run. And it doesn't seem to alarm them. People can walk right up to opossums. I have done that without scaring them away. So again, people think, well, how smart can they be? So it's that slow reaction to possible dangers that make people think that they are stupid. But you have to remember this species has survived for eons and even really truly expanded its range. It does not have a very big brain. It actually has an unusually small brain. The other thing that is interesting about its brain is that there is no connection between the left and the right side of the brain. So the issue with it is it's slow to process incoming information. That's why it's easy to walk up to it. So what have we learned about our opossum? They don't actually play dead under intense fear. They will pass out inventory and again, start reeking of death. And if you're a predator, if something's reeking of death, you're probably not going to eat it. The English word originated from a now extinct language. Again, Captain John Smith is the one. Again, it meant white animal. The O is sometimes silent, usually left out altogether. Old world possums and new world opossums are not closely related. It is a marsupial, and again, the only one found here in North America, meaning that their babies are raised in a pouch on their mother's body, and we know that just because of how underdeveloped that they are. They're quiet, reclusive, solitary animals, except when the mother is with the baby. They're very beneficial to the environment because they're eating, of course, these insect pests, snails, slugs, along with feeding on carrion. Nobody likes to come up on a dead animal that's been there for many days, just especially in the summer. They're very clean and always grooming. They have presental tails and opposable big toes. They are hunted for sport, pelt, and in some states for food. Not sure what they eat. Everybody always says that everything tastes like chicken. Not sure if that would be the case. But think about other animals. Lewis and Clark loved beaver, and that was their favorite animal that they ate on the way out to the West Coast. They might something look like a large rat, but you know, its life history, habitats, I think really make this mammal worthy of our appreciation. Any questions for me?
And I have muted most of you, so if you want to speak, please go down to the corner and unmute yourself first. Anybody have any questions? You answered most of them that I had.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what I usually think, is that I answered everybody's questions and told them more than they ever wanted to know.
Well, I'm just wondering.
What about the Japanese beetle? Do they eat them?
You know, I would bet that they probably do. You know, these animals, you know, food is a driving thing for them. You know, I always say, when we think about food, we're going to go eat at a restaurant, we're going to the grocery store, but food is always on their mind, except, of course, maybe during mating season. So anything that they could eat, I would imagine they would eat. And especially we know their immune system is so good. So if, you know, if any sort of invasive species made their way up here, I couldn't see how it would affect, their health. That's a good question.
And say, Scott, we've got a question from Amanda. She's wondering, is there a group that rescues them in our area, and how do we introduce them to our acreage?
Not that I know of. Really, the unfortunate thing when it comes to rescue animals, unless you're a raptor, like we always, every now and then somebody will come with a turkey with a broken wing. And for mammals, especially as common as the opossum, maybe a zoo would take one. I guess I don't know of anybody that would, but I shouldn't say that. There might be some out there that would. It's, people do love animals, and so you might run across a sanctuary that would take a hurt opossum. So I think internet search would find out that.
Have
So
they
probably-
adapted to like pesticides and things like that? That
Yeah, I guess I don't know if there's been, the problem with, because, when you consider animals vermin like opossums or coyotes, science research does not follow those animals. You think about wolves or moose, those animals, they're the ones that get all the research money. And so I don't know if anybody's ever researched that. Again, there could be a possibility of somebody doing that. And, I think an internet search probably would be able to find that out. Right? You can find anything on the internet nowadays, whether we want it to or not.
and whether you can believe it or not, that's the next
Right,
question.
yeah, exactly.
So do you think it's something like animal rescue, if you have a problem, would they do anything for you, even capture it live and release it somewhere else?
They might. I guess I've not heard much from like our wildlife division of them handling animals like that. A lot of times when they handle animals, it's because they become a pest and they're usually then dispatched. So I guess I don't know for sure. I think an internet search would find you a place if that was the case.
Okay.
I mean, I have a friend that has a possum as a pet, and they keep it outside. And so, I mean, it's not uncommon for people, especially when they're babies, to adopt, because that's the easier way to do it.
Yeah. A
Living
short-term
Earth
pet.
Center did a talk from a woman in Nebraska who they do wildlife
No, yeah.
rescue. And she had opossums in her talk. So I'm guessing that they may do something, but that's a far ways
Right.
from Minnesota. But so there may be some around here that would do it as well.
Yeah, I think if you just go on the internet, I mean, it's always surprising at what you find that people are raising. I mean, it was a few years ago when they found 2 small crocodiles on a bike trail up by, I think it was Bemidji. So somebody had to have been raising them and then got rid of them. I think they're like 2 to 3 feet. So you just never know what your neighbor is raising in their backyard or in their bathtub.
All right, any other questions? If not, I will certainly remind you all that this will be posted on the Vine website, vinevolunteers.com. It'll be underneath Virtual Vine. We have a lot of our educational programs up there. So if you have missed them in the past, you could check it out. Those are all available free of charge, as are these programs, especially now while we're doing them through Zoom rather than in person. So we'll make one more last call for questions. Seeing no other questions, I'm hoping Scott's still there. He's kind of frozen on.
I'm
Oh, you
still
were
here,
kind of
yep.
froze on my screen, so I wasn't sure. But with that, we will thank Scott Kudelka from the DNR for coming today and presenting. Just to let you know, Scott and I are working on a program again for October, and this one will be on the Minnesota River, the history of the Minnesota River. So we're looking at that, I believe, on October 15th is the date that I just saw. So you can look for that. Look for all
Yep.
of the information about upcoming Vine programs there at that virtual Vine at vinevolunteers.com and also on Facebook. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Scott.
Yep, thank you.
And we'll look for you in October.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Amanda says thank you.
Thanks.